And we are live. This is January 22nd. This is the Senate Finance Committee. And we're going to start today with one of my favorite days, which is captive insurance. And I've got Kevin on first. That Kevin is here. Kevin, this is a new committee, and most of them haven't been through captive. So the floor is yours, and just give us a little explanation for who you are and why you're here. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
And just continue to love us. It's a once-a-year event.
Absolutely. We are, of course, delighted to be here. Kevin Mead, I am the CEO of the Vermont Captive Insurance Association. And despite the accent, I am a Newport resident. So put that out there just in case it confuses people.
You're close to Canada.
Exactly. So captives. On a regular basis, businesses are dealing with risk all the time. I mean, the very nature of putting assets to work in a business means that you have risk. The only way of avoiding risk is to do nothing, which in of itself is its own risk. And so what businesses then do is they then have the ability to finance that risk, because risk obviously comes with a cost associated when the risk becomes realized. And so they can finance that risk in a number of ways. They can assume it themselves. I own a trucking business, my truck crashes, I pay to repair the truck. That's one way of financing the risk. Another way of financing that risk is to insure it, to spread that risk with somebody else. And what captive insurance does is spread that risk to an insurance company, which is wholly owned, using my example, by the company that owns the trucks. So they've established a subsidiary, which is a regulated insurance company, and it is that entity which then assumes the risk. So the parent entity pays a premium to the captive, and then claims are paid out of that captive as they occur. So it's an insurance contract, just like a regular insurance contract, except that the ownership relationship exists not with shareholders of an insurance company. The ownership relationship exists as a parent-child relationship with the captive company.
It is not sold to the public.
It is not sold to the public, is correct. And so to give you some superlatives, and I've got colleagues in the room that would have the absolute answers, but about more than 25% of all commercial coverage is written into captives, as opposed to commercial carriers. So it's a huge place in the marketplace in that respect. There is a huge variety of coverages available. The start point for many was the affordability crisis in medical malpractice insurance that occurred around 40 years ago and before, where doctors' practices and medical institutions, hospitals and the like, were having difficulty covering their professionals for medical malpractice insurance, and discovered that when that coverage was either inappropriately priced or unavailable in the commercial market, were able to get that coverage through establishing a captive. So that's one example, an extreme. For those of you that have cell phones, and I can see a number of them here, you may be paying an entity coverage for when your kid spills their oatmeal on the phone and it doesn't work, or things along those lines, and you are paying those premiums to a company. That company may have established a captive in order to collect those premiums from consumers and funding from the parent, and then also pay out those claims when people make a claim on their handset insurance. So there's huge variety in terms of the costs and things like that. Obviously, we're all looking at things like catastrophic events now, and there are, again, commercial entities that put risk into captives for weather-related events. And also an interesting twist on it, which is under a traditional insurance contract, windstorm blows off the roof of a building, It's assessed that it's going to cost $1 million to replace the roof, and the insurance pays out. There's now a twist on that called parametric risk, where it's not the actual cost, it's the event that occurs. So if a tornado occurs within 500 meters of your building, you get paid out, regardless of whether there was actual damage to the value of the contract or not. And so it's a quicker methodology of settling claims.
We did that last year.
We did, that's exactly right. That went through this committee last year in order to enshrine that in the Vermont legislation. So the VCIA is in our 40th anniversary, and we have a dominant position within the captive association world in the same way as Vermont has a dominant position in captive insurance. And so our members consist of folks like the owners of those captive insurance companies, of which there are nearly 700 now registered in Vermont, approaching that number.
Are we still the largest domicile
We are the largest globally,
globally?
not only nationally, but globally. Thank you, Chairman. And those 600 owner members are supplemented by people from the service provider community. So captives tend to need a captive manager. They tend to need an actuary to help price their risk. They tend to need an accountant to produce their audits and financial statements. They tend to need a captive manager to pull all that together. They might need claims specialists because they might be a widget manufacturer that's insuring their widgets against warranty claims. They might need a claims specialist to actually pay out claims on those widgets when it becomes an actual claim. So across all those members, we, the VCIA, provide services related to what are our three new pillars for our organization, which are education, ensuring that the service provider community and the captive owner community receive the education they need in order to be able to operate captives at their fullest efficiency. Member engagement, because we want people talking to each other. We want our members to be engaged for best practice purposes with each other. And then lastly, the third pillar, advocacy, which is why we're here today, because we rely on our partnership with the Vermont legislature to produce state-of-the-art legislation to drive us forwards and ensure that we maintain that global leadership position. And it's through the activity of this committee and your predecessors on this committee, current and prior leadership of this committee, together with your colleagues in the House, that we have legislation that is literally copied. I mean, we found an example where they copied a piece of Vermont legislation and didn't do the find and replace correctly and left the word Vermont in it.
That's really sloppy drafting.
I mean, you know, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and I get that, but nonetheless, perhaps a little more attention to these that might have been beneficial.
Yeah, we wonder
Nice to
about
know
their
what
ability to
state did
regulate
that.
the captive.
Which state did that? It might begin with the letter O, and it might end with the letter A.
Well,
And I might not be.
Might be a song about that statement.
Yes. I really hope no one from said state is watching.
we'll probably still do the same thing around here.
I wouldn't be surprised. So this is a really strong, vital, growing industry. The growth that this industry saw in terms of captive registrations last year in 2024 was in the top 10 of all years since the legislation was enacted 44 years ago, the legislation being older than the VCIA. And so this is still a growing industry. And in a moment, you're going to hear from one of the VCIA's board members about why she came to Vermont with her captive. And I certainly don't want to detract from that, but I need to talk a little about challenges that we're facing. This is a global industry with global risks, and there are lots of players out there. There are 40 other locations within the US that people may register a captive, and there are locations ranging from Bermuda and the Caymans, two of our largest international competitors, down to places like Labuan, which is a location in Malaysia. which is established primarily for Asian captives. So we face global competition. And the organizations that are coming to Vermont are often global organizations with global risk. And so we need to be sophisticated about that. We face competition for talent. We have a limited talent pool in Vermont in terms of both the people that we can deploy for regulation and also the people that we can deploy in the support of the industry here in Vermont. And so workforce development is critical for our industry and driving us forwards. And as the VCIA, we face infrastructure issues. And by infrastructure, I don't mean bridges and roads. By infrastructure, I mean for our annual conference, we bring over 1,000 people to Burlington. And 1,000 people coming to Burlington on one day or 2 days means that I have people calling me up saying, I'd love to come to your conference. The best they can do is get me to Albany and give me a rental car to drive. Then we have to house 1,000 people in Burlington. Last year, it took 7 hotels. I believe that the VCIA for 3 days becomes the largest bus company in Vermont. I think we beat Green Mountain Transit for the number of people we move around. Isn't that a strange statistic? But we literally have that level of people visiting us, and we are moving them around the city as we take them to events around the city. And those limitations are something that we face. So this now brings me to what do we need from you? And this is where I start to move from my friendly and flippant to being a wee bit demanding. We need you guys to really strongly commit to resource the DFR, especially the captive division going forwards, and especially to make sure that they've got world-class systems that match the world-class people. These are people that are fielding calls from all over the country every day, saying, how do we do this? You guys are the experts. How do we do it? Bluntly, industry has a concern that systems are not matching the live wear, and that we need to address whether or not the DFR is sufficiently resourced to move that forwards. That's a concern that members are bringing to me. Next big ask I've got of you is our conference, August the 11th to 13th. Be great if someone could come along to that, come to one of our receptions. We have multiple receptions. We have a VCIL, Vermont Captive Insurance Emerging Leaders reception, which is for the young folks. We have an LGBTQ reception. We have 2 big receptions that 1,000 people will be at. Come along to that and meet the people who you are providing the regulation to, and talk to them about how important this industry is to you. My next big ask, between Brittany, my colleague at the DED, and myself, there's a chance we may come looking for cash from you. And I realise, Madam Chairman, that you've liked me heretofore because
You send me cash.
because I sent you that. But harking back to that infrastructure question, we are wondering whether or not Burlington and Vermont in general needs to get more deliberate about what's called the Monday to Thursday economy. So business travel, and not just for the VCIA, because we are kind of the biggest event that ever comes to town. But the question would be could we seek out whether or not we could develop Burlington as a much more MICE, and MICE stands for Meetings, Incentives, Conventions and Expositions. Could we develop Burlington to go after that lucrative business by having a better infrastructure for those exact meetings? That would take things like feasibility studies, which would require funding.
Okay, and I can remember trying to get NCORD, which has a couple hundred people in Vermont. And yes, we, in much smaller scale, the only place that was large enough was Burlington.
Yeah.
And we had another group through here last year that had the same issues. You're required, right, by law to hold your annual meeting in Vermont.
If you're a Vermont registered captive, yes.
If you're a Vermont, okay. But it would change everything if you couldn't be here on an annual basis.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And we as an organization wouldn't abandoned. We are just limited in our scope for expansion.
Yeah.
That, and one of the things the board has asked us to do is expand, and we're out of expansion mode.
Okay.
And then I've got lots of things I'm asking you for.
It's okay.
Continue the work that you've done on making sure that the legislation under which captives operate in Vermont and the regulation is that world-class legislation. That's another big ask. And then, allied to the one about coming to the conference and visiting with some of these captive owners and others from the industry, is becoming a cheerleader for the industry and realizing that we face one interesting problem in this industry, which is that it can be incredibly mobile. For Ben and Jerry's to up sticks and move somewhere would create an issue. They'd have to build more infrastructure, they'd have to build more factories. For Cabot Cheese, it's the same. For Global Foundries, it's the same. To relocate an office serving the captive industry is a couple of strokes of a pen and a new lease agreement somewhere other than Vermont. And so we need to be aggressive in our protection and promotion of the industry here in order to ensure that that ease of relocation doesn't come back and harm us. So that was my sort of gloom and doom to a certain extent.
Message heard.
But what I want to do is pass over to Melinda Young, if I may, Madam Chairman. Melinda is a member of the board of VCIA and is also the VCIA board secretary at the moment, but more importantly, has a great story to tell about her captive and why it's here.
Yes, thank you.
We have a question.
That's one good question.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm new to captive insurance, so I really appreciate this. And Brittany lives in the town next door, so I might be knocking on her door for more information at some point. I'm wondering, I live in Burlington and we obviously are aware of our housing situation and our housing crisis, frankly. And have also had all kinds of permit issues with building hotels and so on and so forth. But I am wondering, have you given this information to the mayor, the city council? Are they aware of what they are potentially missing out on when you can't be accommodated?
Short answer is tangentially.
Okay.
So Brittany and I and Joan Goldstein are in a group, an ad hoc group put together, including Jeff from Hello Burlington. And so Jeff is working with us on that and is making mayor and council aware without going with formal asks and formal requests at this stage. And we're also involving some of our partners in the lodging and hospitality industry as well, because obviously they would be key to having support for this, because without their support, it's dead on arrival. So, yeah, so short answer, we are sort of, yes, but haven't yet made it formal because we don't yet have the ability to do a feasibility study.
Thank you. Okay. Keep us posted.
Shall do. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. Well, Linda, coming up.
Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here, so thank you for having me. I am Linda Young, and I am Vice President of Risk Management for Alberici Constructors. I'll tell you a bit about myself. And I've been in the insurance industry 34 years now. 28 of that I was an insurance broker. Commercial insurance broker, mainly focused on the construction industry. Had the opportunity in 2018 to join Alberici, who had been one of my clients for about 14 years, so half of my career. I also serve as chairperson for the Associated General Contractors Surety Bonding and Construction Risk Management Forum Group. That's a lot of words right there. And have the honor of serving as board member of the VCIA and secretary. A little bit about Alberici. We are a diversified construction company. We have operations throughout North America with about 3,500 craft and salaried employees. We are headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. We operate as a general contractor, construction manager, design build contractor. We were founded in 1918 by John Albarese. Some of you probably know John Albarese, who happens to be this John Albarese's grandson. We started steel fabrication operations. We have that in St. Louis in 1958. Last year in 2023, we had a little over $4 billion in revenue. You can see the markets we serve there were pretty diverse, as I mentioned, everything from automotive, education, food and beverage, hospitality. We were ranked 39th largest contractor in the US by Engineering News Record in 2023. And we hired our first safety professional in 1962, which at that point, we saw a 35% decrease in accidents. And that is sort of how we got into the captive world. We actually have two captives. One is NC3, it's based here in Vermont. That captive was established in December of 2000. We also have MC3, or Mountain City Casualty Company, that's domiciled in Missouri. Essentially, that captive serves as a pass-through because of the Dodd-Frank legislation to avoid any tax issues. But everything is really insured in here in Vermont. So NC3 provides 100% reinsurance to MC3. You can see there the coverages that we write through our captive. So these are our core casualty coverages: general liability, auto liability, workers' compensation, professional and pollution, subcontractor default insurance. We also write our medical stop loss and asbestos liability. We also participate in a workers' compensation reinsurance. So how it all started, Albarese was invited some years ago to participate in a group captive. So it was a construction captive where a bunch of construction companies come together to share the risk. We considered it, but at that point in time, we decided to start our own captive. Although there were benefits to joining a group captive, we really felt that there were other coverages that we wanted to write outside the group captive, and it provided us better financial flexibility. So we set out on the journey of creating our own captive. I will tell you that cost savings was not a primary focus for Albarese. It was really focused. Our motivation was really just a commitment to safety and being able to control our own destiny. That cost savings that we would enjoy would be allow us to focus on safety training, materials, training, equipment, really just to support that culture. So we really wanted a well-regulated onshore domicile. It was very important for us for our domicile to be for it to convey for us professionalism, credibility, transparency to the parent organization, as well as to our project owners. We also often get questioned about our insurance costs and things from our project owners. So it was important for us to be able to pass the red face test, as my boss would say. After consideration of various domiciles, it was clear that Vermont was the gold standard. You can see the relationships that we have there within Vermont. Aon is our captive manager. Paul, Frank, and Collins serves as our legal advisor. Auditor Crow. We also have an actuary at Aon as well. Our third-party claims are handled in St. Louis. Why Vermont? The resources and education here are second to none. I can tell you personally, I have gained a ton of knowledge from this community. As I mentioned, I was in the insurance brokerage world, but I didn't work in captives. I knew enough to be dangerous, enough to talk about what it was. So when I joined Albarese, I had to learn the hard way. And this, particularly DCIA, has been a huge benefit to me personally, just in educating me about what captives are and what they can do. Which leads me to my second bullet point of the captive community here is extremely collaborative. I've never seen a group of people that really come together to support the industry and strengthen the industry as a whole. The DFR, I was sharing with Sandy earlier, always very responsive, professional, and supportive. We are going through an exam right now that we go through for years, and the staff there has been really incredible to work with. And the synergy between the DFR and the DED is very impressive and effective. And of course, all of you that provide the governmental support to the captive industry. It's extremely important to captive owners ourselves to have that infrastructure. And of course, as you know, Vermont is the world's largest captive insurance trade association of the BCBA. We do perceive it as a beneficial partnership. Alvarezzi's captive, we write about 25.5 million in premium in 2023, and approximately 23.7 in 2024. As I mentioned, we pay professional and management fees to companies here within Vermont, to the tune of about approximately $600,000 annually. And we do hold our board meeting. We call it a retreat where we all come together as a board. Usually we bring our spouses. So we do support the Vermont economy. We typically spend anywhere from 25 to 30,000 on that weekend trip. And I will tell you, I have grown to love Vermont. I had never been to Vermont before I joined Alvarezzi and came involved in the captive. And the people here are phenomenal. I just really enjoy being a part of it. So
You can say that today. It was 10 below.
well, I will tell you when I left St. Louis, the other way, it was 4 degrees and
Okay.
it was 9 degrees here. So I gained 5 degrees.
Wow. What doesn't matter.
Small victory.
Small, but you think that. That's it. Thank you again for your support and hope I think you know and have the sense that this is an important industry to not only business owners like us, but to other people as well. So appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is, I've been in this seat for a long time. This is the first concern I've heard from captives. We are risking outgrowing ourselves because we have been so successful.
Yeah.
So we will have to work in that.
It's a good problem to have, right?
Yes,
But,
it
yeah.
is. But again, we want you to come here and have a good time and enjoy Vermont and not spend most of your time being shuttled around in buses. You know, and there is an advantage, the convenience of being able to just get in an elevator and go downstairs from your room to, you know, all kinds of events. And so we will have to have a chat with the city of Burlington, but it is a much broader issue. We know we don't have a venue for any moderately scaled events. That includes entertainment events and business events. So it's something for us to work on. Committee, any questions? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you.
I think that's all I have. Thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Anything?
Thanks, Matt. Thanks.
Thank you. You too.
Right there, theater shed.
When they.
Yeah, so they say it's gotta be checked.
That's why I was here.
Because when people choose,
So
they
Board of
walk
Health
out and
was
see church.
that
That's
different?
kind of true. I go to the church, he's got it. Yeah, you got his equipment.
John and his wife spent extra
You see that, on the South Road.
Right, other areas.
Oh,
And
Every
like,
single
well,
year.
they're hauling it.
wow.
So they go, it's-
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, shared.
We did.
Buildings.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, just for the.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think they should just come up to Milton.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a nice feeling that it could go in.
Be better, but
Yeah.
summer.
Well, we just don't have to tell you.
Memorial
what.
for you.
No.
I mean, I
That
think
both
it's like
have,
5 to
that's part
6
you
months.
want.
Yeah.
That's called.
Yeah.
So you-
Had grand
Something
swell.
great, probably.
Huge.
Or I don't know, it's in Maine, yeah, so
Found out
right by
that
Nectar's.
things like
Before
the,
the- So it's a place for a thing, but it won't be big
Yeah.
enough, for, like a huge convention center. Otherwise, the water.
Okay, continue on.
Field-
I'm with you.
yeah, last year, the, sun
Oh, the eclipse.
eclipse,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have an issue, they can't get direct flights to Vermont.
Yeah.
And there aren't that, it was a real challenge scheduling people
Yeah.
in and out because we don't have that many regular flights. So we get a large number of people here. I mean, and Coral used to go to really interesting places like the Florida Keys. And it was great once you got there, but it involved renting a car or they had a van. So it was an hour and a half drive. We go to Santa Fe. Again, you can take a puddle jumper or you can drive up from Albuquerque. There's new leadership and they go to big cities that you can fly into and they hire a party planner. And it's all in a big hotel.
Mhm.
I don't find it,
No, never did.
it's not something I
No,
find
but it's
interesting
convenient.
enough.
Close
So,
by.
Yeah.
Columbus, but we are one of those smaller, more interesting, but
Well, where did they
it's
do it?
challenging. Okay, committee, we have had one witness asked to talk to us. And then I am scheduled a vote on Eric Johnson. We try and get those out. These are governor's appointments. Generally, unless we find the person to be completely incompetent or a felon. We vote them through, the idea being that the governor has a right to choose his team. We have not reappointed someone twice, and he has continued to serve. So there is a lawsuit about something similar to that, but that is the long-standing practice. So, Mr. Whitaker, you would like to justify, so I've got you down for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stephen Whitaker, Montpelier, been working on telecommunications planning on and off for 30-something years in Vermont. I first want to offer context. I listened, reviewed Garrett Johnson's testimony and his claim that I had claimed he was intimate with the commissioner and because he wrote a letter of support. The context for that is this article, which I'll share with you, from 1991, written by Dave Graham of the Associated Press. And I was quoting from Art Ristow or Phil Hoff. It's unclear which of them said that. The relationship of regulators to regulated is more than symbiotic. It is intimate. And either Carrick didn't read the attachment or he wanted to make some hay. That's for you to decide.
Are we talking about the email that pretty much bordered on indecency?
No, it's,
Stepped over the bounds of,
no, it referred to intimate with
Yes.
the Tierney
yes,
administration. And that's where this comes from. This was attached to that email. There was no context, there was no other text. This was all that was attached to the email. So there was no room for ambiguity. But really, the purpose of my testimony is, do we really want the fox guarding the hen house? Back in 1991, questions were raised about whether, and I have some more copies of that if y'all want it.
I don't think most of us have gotten that. Thank you.
Questions were raised about whether Green Mountain Power was, quote, wired into the state of Vermont through more than just its electric grid. As Dave Graham's AP article shows, dated August 31st, there was and is a revolving door between the utilities and the governor's office, whether the governor is a Republican or a Democrat. History may be about to repeat itself, but you are now informed and in a position to begin the long overdue task of reforming the Department of Public Service on behalf of ratepayers, affordability, transparency, and integrity. You can begin by voting to not confirm this appointee as commissioner. Today, Velco manages the reliable, cost-effective transmission of electrical energy throughout Vermont and New England. Velco is also a certificated telecommunications carrier regulated by the Public Utilities Commission with massive fiber assets and data transmission capacity. Velco's executive advisor, quote, was recently tapped by Governor Scott to serve beginning January 6th as the commissioner of the Public Service Department. In 2017, his title was Vice President of Strategy and Communication. But because of his deep ties to Velco, I believe he's far from the ideal candidate to head up the Public Service Department, charged with not only planning, but advocacy. Several reasons are offered for this. Velco required increased oversight. It's a company that is 51% owned by Vermont ratepayers. This is something most people don't understand. And I just got an email clarifying that. Yes, this is correct. The term dividends and the term stock is used. V-Light owns 83,592 shares of common V stock. Green Mountain Power owns 88,080 shares. If you combine V-Light shares with the other Vermont-owned utility, they own more. It was done that way by design in this committee in order that Gaz Metro out of Canada, a foreign corporation, would not control our transmission. So we created this nonprofit, and V-Light gets 3 seats on the Velco board. So Velco requires increased oversight. It's 51%. Yet the state practically ignores both its obligation and opportunity to effectively harness that equity or management share. For example, towards affordable and resilient fiber build out. Fiber in this case means more than just broadband to the last mile. Fiber is also Vermont's best bet for creating a resilient public safety grade network to support public safety, radio communications, commerce, education, telemedicine, broadband, and cell service. The salaries of Velco executives are astonishingly high. We need a public service department head who can commit to the examination and containment of those salaries paid by Vermont ratepayers to Velco executives and do so in an unbiased manner. Here's a former Department of Public Service engineer and your candidates' salaries over the last 6 years, 7 years. To be billing a $750,000 salary for an individual or several $1 million to Mr. Garrett Johnson definitely raises the question of loyalty. And when he's done in Public Service Department, he will probably be back at Velco. So Velco has a robust fiber network, which is bringing in substantial revenue. Vermonters need to know how much and where that revenue is going at fair rates as part of the statewide resilient fiber design. A Velco executive has also been appointed by the governor to the Vermont Community Broadband Board. He's a close colleague of Mr. Johnson, happens to be the fiber network engineer. With the broadband board also needs greater oversight, but that cannot come from anyone who's intimately involved in avoiding transparency and avoiding integrated planning for fiber so as to protect the electric ratepayers and the safety of all Vermonters. Velco is charging customers to use its fiber network and its radio towers. They're claiming that all those contracts and all those rates are secret. Velco regulation is needed to determine if those charges are fair and equitable. Again, an insider should not be your preferred choice to measure the accountability of such a large and powerful corporation. Minutes of the operating committee related to the $100 million fiber network and the minutes from the telecom subcommittee disappeared a few years ago from the Velco website. I had been relying on those to learn what I know about how to advise y'all on what the opportunities and risks are. They just went dark. Investigations into transparency and affordability must be initiated by someone less connected to Velco. Long-range planning and emergency response protocols are lacking. Velco's fiber network could and should be a critical piece of the solution, but it'll take someone from outside to ask the many tough questions whose answers are necessary to ensure our resilient communications going forward. Should the high-capacity statewide fiber network now owned and managed by Velco, that's part of ISO New England, both transmission and increasingly distributed electric generation and storage, all relies on fiber connectivity. Had that been allowed to be built haphazardly, built differently in each of the 15 or so distribution utilities, rather than be constructed according to a unified, resilient, engineered Velco plan, we would have something that kind of looks like the CMDs. That topic that needs more time and the telecom plan. Should Velco's resilient fiber design and network operations management, network operations center be considered for management of the new inter-CUD network, carrying mission critical 911, public safety radio, cellular, other network traffic? Should the electric distribution utilities be enlisted to or required to build open access fiber, which is a statutory requirement? The statute of 30 VSA 202C says shall support open access for competitors and competitive choice for consumers. The broadband board, under the auspices of the department and the department's tenure plan, ignores that statute. Their justification is they intend to change the statute. So they wrote a plan to match what they hope the statute will be changed to rather than what's the current law. Anytime an industry leader becomes a regulator, we should do a double take and then a triple take even, and then double down on our scrutiny. As was mentioned in that 1991 article, quote, because of the degree to which they are regulated, utilities have a relationship with the government like few other businesses. There should be an arm's length relationship, end quote. I ask that you not approve Governor's appointment of Carrick Johnson as commissioner. Instead, insist the governor find someone who has no direct connection to any of the regulated utilities and no obvious potential conflicts of interest.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, committee? All right, thank you. I would like to get a full committee here for any vote.
Would you allow time for the missing members to hear
Yes.
my testimony?
No, we do not repeat testimony. Members have an obligation to be here to hear testimony. You may hand them your written testimony.
But might they have an opportunity to review the video before they vote?
No, if they want to see a video, they can see it
After they vote?
whenever. The same as they can if they miss Mr. Johnson's. We do not repeat. It is the obligation of the senator to get the information they feel they need to make a good vote. I'm going to give us our next meeting is at, right? I lost it again. 3:00. 3:00. So I'm going to give us a half-hour break. Come back at 3. We have Tom Cavett. He's zooming in, right?
No, I heard
Oh, he's gonna be here. He's going to go over the report, the consensus revenue and all the other fund reports that he gave to the E-Board this morning, and that were accepted and approved by the E-Board. That's the numbers we will have to start building our budgets on. And the Ed Fund is there. And we will get Julia Richter in at some point to tell us about that she has been very busy working with the governor's people that are putting together the proposal. We're going to get a briefing on at 3:45. and just trying to understand their numbers and so that she can help us as understand what the proposal is. So, I think that's it.
I have a question about the appointment process.
Yeah.
Because it is, a big responsibility for us in the Senate to review and, agree or disagree with the appointment. Do we get a sense of how many folks were considered for the position or anything like that?
I believe, and I can check on it, it goes through the nominating. There's a list. You can sign up if you're interested in being a part of it. I think at this level, they may have been recruited. Carrick said he got a phone call.
Right.
We don't have a large pool in Vermont, which leads to a lot of that. There just isn't a large pool of expertise hanging around out there unemployed by anyone in the industry to choose from. I believe the former secretary or chair was an attorney, former career military, not a lot. For that, we had somebody who came out of the Chamber of Commerce and did economic development.
We all wear a lot of hats, so I
Yeah.
totally understand that. I just, sometimes it would be nice to have a little bit more of an insider view to what goes on into these appointments. Sounds like I just need to do the research.
I don't know what goes on
Okay.
in the governor's office.
Yeah.
But this has been the way, as far as since I've been here, that it's been pretty much, this is the governor's team. And,
Yep. Okay.
he chooses his people. Okay, I will see you now in 27 minutes.
3 o'clock, 2:45.
I want to do 2:40. We're not on until 3, yeah. So I want to give us 15 minutes to have your discussion before we have to vote. Okay, and if anyone sees her, I know Senator Hardy is in another committee. I'm assuming she will be back. And I don't know where Senator Brock
Where do I?
is, but the Secretary of the Senate.
Still here, so I can come back.
Yeah, he usually comes back. The Secretary of the Senate was here, handed